Okay, it's 4:03 by my clock, so we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited that you have joined us today. We are really excited about Women's History Month, and that is the whole month of March. So, for our speaker series this month, we really wanted to focus on women in STEM. So, we have a couple of amazing women with us today that are going to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to be a woman in STEM, making change, because that's what women in STEM are all about, right? Is making change and making this the best place it can be. All right. Just to get started, in case you don't know us and you somehow found this link, the speaker series happens once a month. So it's the third Wednesday of each month. And it is hosted by the Biogen Community Lab and the Lemelson MIT program. So just a little bit about us. The Biogen Community Lab is a part of Biogen. We focus on really connecting to our communities and specifically the students in our communities to really inspire the next generation of scientists. So if you're a student here, we're really excited that you're here. And we hope that this sparks some interest in science for you. We opened our community lab in 2002, our first one, which was in Massachusetts. We also now have a physical one in North Carolina. And then we have gone global. So we are teaching and seeing students all around the world virtually, which has been really fun. So I see we have some people from Puerto Rico and Spain. So welcome to our global students. Um, then the Lemelson MIT program is the other sponsor of this event. They are based out of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that School of Engineering, and they really focus on students as well, and they focus on more the invention aspect of that, which is pretty exciting. So I see about 3,200 students and 500 educators per year to get those people excited about science and specifically about our, invention and how that falls into science. So, with all that being said, I'm not going to talk for anymore because you don't want to hear me. That's not why you're here. I'm going to hand it over to our first speaker. So we have two speakers with us today. First, we have Wanda Castro Barrero. She is an employee here at Biogen. She's going to tell you a little bit more about that. And then later, we'll also hear from Katrina Hull, who is an educator who's joining us all the way from Oregon. So we're really excited to have her. We'll hear from both of those. They'll tell us a little bit about their story and what it's like being a woman in STEM. And then we will have a portion for question and answers. So while they're talking, if you do have questions that come up, the easiest way to ask your question is going to be to click that Q&A button on your Zoom screen and put your question in there, and that way we can see it. You can also use the chat. It's just sometimes when we get lots of chat messages, things get missed. So if you don't want your question to get missed, put it in that Q&A section. That usually works a little bit better, but we'll have time for questions. So hopefully you guys will have a lot of really exciting questions. So now I'm going to switch it over to Wanda. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let her share her screen, and she's going to take it away.
Okay. I'm going to share my desktop. Perfect. So thank you, everybody. And I'm very excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation. And today, what I would like is to share with you a little bit of my story, right? And how I am, who I am, where I'm coming from, how I made it to be here now. And hopefully, along the lines, some of you can identify with my story. And the most significant thing is like, it doesn't matter where you are now. This doesn't define where you're going to be in the future, and that we all have the power to do great things in life. The main thing is like we need to trust in ourselves. Don't self-doubt yourself. There are many people outside that are doing that for you. Just trust in yourself. And even when you don't get the information or the validation from people close to you, get the strength to do it for yourself, right? So I'm going to share with you my story, and along the lines, I'm going to give you a little bit of bits and information about how I got to where I am right now. As Alex says, my name is Wanda Castro Borrero. I am a neurologist and also a pharmacist. I am currently the Global Field Medical Excellence Head at Biogen, and I'm going to tell you in a few minutes what that is. But this is where I'm coming from. This is the Atlantic Ocean. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, which is a very small island in the Caribbean. And I'm going to show you specifically where it is, right? So if you look at the map and the globe, and then now you focus on the Americas, right? North America, South America, Central America. And here is where I want you to pay more attention. This is the Caribbean. And within the Caribbean, you will find this very small island. It's about 100 by 35. And it is Puerto Rico or Borinquen. Everyone that is born on the island or that is a descent from someone born in the island is called Boricua, because Borinquen was the name that the native Indians give to the island. And when you look here, this red area is my hometown. It is called Arecibo. And some of you might heard about Arecibo recently because it has this largest telescope, right? And recently, and unfortunately, it collapsed. And a lot of history went down with it. My country is trying to rebuild with the help of the United States and many people. So hopefully that telescope, which was the largest in the world, will soon be established. And then when you look here, this is my hometown. This is a view, and I think it's so beautiful, right? You have the ocean is here, the Atlantic Ocean is covering. And then my home, this is the house that I grew up in Puerto Rico. It's in this area here. So I was very close to the ocean all my life until I moved to the United States. But it was not always this pretty. And what I want to really show you is what it looked when I was growing up. This is another view. This is the house that I grew up. And I want to show you all this area here that I'm circling here is called La Puntilla, or that is the name of the neighborhood. And when I was growing up, this was a really bad neighborhood. Especially this area is called the callejones, or where the aisles, aisle is a callejon, and there were many small aisles and houses were one on top of the other. And saying that you were from La Puntilla, people will be scared. People will not really want to associate with you. So my grandma tried to avoid us saying that we were from this area. As a kid, I never thought it was a bad thing, even though when I was 8 years old, I saw someone that was killed in the area, and I will tell you that image will never get out of my head. You know, I'm 50 years old now, and I still remember when I saw this. And maybe some of you are coming from the hood, like they say, right? And you have seen this firsthand. Maybe some of you know what it is not to have a lot of food on the table, right? And that's what I said, where you're coming from doesn't define where you're going. It can only make you stronger. Because also in this area in Arecibo, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I met someone, and his name was Dr. Rivera Aulet. And he probably never thought of me of anyone major, right? But he was the doctor of our community, and he will charge $2 for each visit. And if you didn't have money to pay, he will write your name in a notebook and said that you owe him $2. But he will never go back and ask you to pay for those $2. And if you didn't have $2, you can give him some plantains or some yuca or some potatoes or eggs or chickens, and you pay him with that. And that was the first time that I saw, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor and help people. And something that was good is that my mother was very strict, and she always enforced on us that we needed to study. That was really important to her because she knew that was the only way that we were going to get out of the neighborhood. And she also knew that I love math. since I was a kid. I love math, I love science, and that I was always the kid that they said estofona, or like the nerd, that I was always studying. I have a twin sister, and she will not study as hard as I did. She's really smart though, and while I was studying a lot of science and different things, she was just having fun with friends. I don't regret that, because I all my study paid off, and I'm proud of it, right? And I said that maybe others will not tell you, because my mom will never told me that she was proud of me, or how much it meant to her what I did in my life, until she was unfortunately dying, and she finally gave me what I really wanted from her for many years, right? So the power is in you. You have the capabilities of doing things. And even though I want to be a doctor, I really went into pharmacy school, and I became a pharmacist. And it was mainly because my grandfather didn't believe in doctors. Doctors in Puerto Rico, when he was growing up, did very bad things, and he was not fan of physicians. So I went into pharmacy because it also is a very reputable profession back in the day in Puerto Rico, and still they know a lot. They are really smart people. And I will say, if you're considering different roles in your career, pharmacy could be one of them. I still strongly believe that pharmacists are one of the most smart people I know, because they need to learn about the disease, but also how the drug affects the body, how it's metabolized, kidney, liver, what are the pharmacodynamics or pharmacokinetics of this product. And they're not only retail pharmacy, you can see them also in the hospitals, and they do advice to the physicians, to the patients. You can also see them in industry, and I have very great colleagues here at Biogen that are pharmacists, and they do different roles. So if you're looking for a profession, I will strongly recommend pharmacy. And I enjoy all the time, all those years. My last job as a pharmacist, I was the chief of the pharmacy department at the University District Hospital in Puerto Rico, which is the largest tertiary hospital in the island. So I became very successful within the profession. And I will say that the main reason was that I seek every opportunity. I learn every time someone says, who wants to do this? Wanda will do it. I will learn as much as I could, because I want to make sure that I was the best in my role. But at some point, I just stopped and I said, okay, Wanda, you've been 5 years as a pharmacist. You love being a pharmacist, but this is not really what I wanted to do, right? I always want to be a doctor. I remember Dr. Rivera Led. So I decided, and I talked with my family, right? I grew up with my grandparents, my mother, my twin sister, my cousin, and my aunt. We were 7 people in a very small house. And I talked with my grandpa, and I said, I really want to do medicine. And everybody supported me. At this moment, my mom was remarried, and my stepdad is very supportive of me, which has been a blessing in my life. And I went to med school. And when I was in med school, I became the president of my class, because, as I said, seek the opportunity, right? Women, we're strong. We can make decisions. We need to empower. We need to feel empowered that we can do this. And when it was time to make a decision what specialty to do, I decided to go into neurology. My grandmother had Parkinson's. My grandfather had 2 strokes. And unfortunately, he passed on my last year of med school, so he couldn't see my graduation. But everything I learned from them was that, took me to where I was. And I went into neurology because neurology is the most exciting part of medicine. The brain has everything we do. It has your speech, your sleep, your awakening, when I'm moving my hands, when I'm thinking, everything is localized to your brain. If there is a small part of your brain that is damaged, we will know what's happening, right? So that is what I think is so fascinating, what you could do. And within neurology, you have many disciplines to do. You can be a specialist in seizures or migraines and headaches, or you can be a specialist in multiple sclerosis. You can be a specialist in cognition. So you have a lot of different things that you can do as a neurologist. So I was accepted at the University of Connecticut, and I did my residency there between UConn and Hartford Healthcare. And I really enjoy my time there. And once again, I seek every opportunity and I learn and study as much as I could. And I become the chief resident on my last year. Um, and when I decided to do what I'm going to be doing next, because neurology was not enough, let's do a subspecialty, I was very interested in multiple sclerosis because of family members with MS, and also because they said, oh, Puerto Ricans don't get MS, they live in the equator, this is a white woman disease. And I learned that it wasn't. I had a lot of Puerto Rican patients in Hartford, Connecticut, that had MS, and they are from Puerto Rico. So I decided to, and also with my family members, I said, I'm going to study MS. And I went to UT Southwestern Dallas, where I did my fellowship, and then I was part of the faculty. And I will say that unfortunately was the first time in the United States that I feel racism against me because of my name, right? And my accent. Patients were not, there were patients that didn't want to see me because of that. But at the same time, I have people that really supported me and never let these things to get into me. I'm a lot more than what other people will think. And I was there for about 3 years. And then I went to the University of Connecticut once again and practiced there for another 3 years. I think that neurology, if you're looking and you want to be a physician, look into neurology. It is or if you want to do a PhD, right? And you want to be a doctor and do more research, neuroscience is so rich, and the brain is an amazing body part to study. Then, even though I was a physician and I was happy taking care of patients, there was a time in which I get burned out. I want to be like Dr. Rivera led. I want to spend time with my patients. I want to advise them and take time. But the truth is that I needed to see more patients and spend more time writing notes, and it took a toll on me. So I said, so what else could I do? I want to go to a place that I can use everything I have learned during my whole life. And basically, a company, I thought about industry, and I thought about a company that has the same values that I have. And that was Biogen. And I came here about 7 years ago in June as a medical director. And as a medical director in medical affairs, what we do is like we look at products that are already in the market, and we became subject matter experts on these products, right? We determine what studies and analysis are needed for this group, for this drug. We also determine what publications are needed for efficacy or for safety concerns. And we educate a group of field medical, right, which are the medical science liaisons or the medical value liaisons. We provide them with tools and resources and training that they can help educate providers. And I've been doing this job for about 6 years when I was appointed to be the global head of field medical excellence. And I see this, and I set global standards for our field medical team, right? I just started, it's not even 6 months, so I haven't had big wins yet, but hopefully soon we were going to start showing all the different things that we could do. But this also gave me the opportunity to expand my wings, right? Not only thinking about what we're doing in the US, but all over the globe. And the most important thing is, as a woman, we can walk very strong that, I'm setting these standards for all Biogen Field Medical. And I know a lot of very brilliant and strong women at Biogen significantly, and because we're talking about women in STEM, we need to make sure that we support each other and we help each other and never forget where you're coming from. Saying this, I think in my life, I have done this circle. I went from pharmacy, right, and doing this part, to learning how to care for patients, to then go to industry. And all of this is part of the medications, but more importantly, improving patient outcomes. Because even though I'm not seeing my patients anymore, everything I do at Biogen is to improve patient outcomes in the long run. And that is still very significant. And then for me is, and trying to get to you guys, is that when we look at STEM, right, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, another acronym is smart, strong, talented, trailblazer, enthusiastic, empowered, masterful, and mighty. And that's what you are, and that's what we're looking, strong women. And with that, I think I'm gonna stop presenting. These are some pictures of my homeland in Puerto Rico, so we can continue the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wanda. So now we're going to move on. We're going to hear from our next speaker. And then, like I said, we're going to have time for questions. So if you have questions specifically for Wanda, make sure you put those in the Q&A. But thanks, Wanda. Next, we're going to have Katrina. Like I said, she's joining us from Oregon. So thanks for jumping time zones to the other side of the country. And Katrina's going to tell us what it's like to be a science teacher in STEM that is a woman, and to trying to raise the next generation of women in STEM. So Katrina, I will let you take over.
Awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time zone you are on right now. It's so exciting to be here. And I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel like myself in this picture, not because this is me, but also because sometimes life is really overwhelming. Does anybody ever feel that way? Where you have so many things going on and you keep asking yourself, do I have time to even say yes to this thing? Like, there's this great opportunity. I could go to that webinar today at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. Do I have time to say yes to this? And that has kind of been my path. Growing up, I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I have always, like Wanda, loved math. I loved science. I really just loved everything about school. Graduated from high school, went to community college for a year because I knew that I wanted to go into the field of education. I thought at the time I wanted to be an elementary education teacher. And I was sitting in an elementary education class, and we were analyzing children's books, and we were looking at the color and the font and the structure, which is exciting if you want to be an elementary teacher. But it was in that class that I realized I don't think elementary students are my jam, but I know that I want to go into education. So what should I do? Well, I asked myself this question, do I have time to say yes to a Texas Instruments conference where we headed on a bus to Chicago, Illinois, and Texas Instruments was putting on this fantastic conference where they were showing their latest and greatest technology. And it was at that conference that I said, I'm really missing my math classes. And then I was like, oh, that's not normal. Not everyone feels that way about mathematics. So I should, you know what? I think I should pursue becoming a high school math teacher. And that's exactly what I did. So I ended up graduating with my degree in math education, got my master's from Western Michigan University in educational technology. And I have since taught math education. Well, I say since until you get to this picture. And this is at a time where there was someone at my school district that said, Katrina, we know that you really enjoy mathematics and you enjoy high schoolers and you love being in the classroom, but would you be interested in heading up an after school engineering and invention club? And I was like, well, I mean, I think I have a little bit of extra time after school. That sounds fun. okay, sure, sign me up. So I said yes to that. And what ended up happening is I had a group of guys who um, were invited to compete in a college competition. And they said, you know what, Mrs. Holt, we're not going to just compete, but we are going to win that. And I was like, what? And they ended up winning this college competition. This group of high schoolers that had not gone through an engineering program, who, for some of you, you're in the same position they are. They didn't have a ton of background in engineering, but they were like, you know what? We're going to show up and we're going to participate. And what was cool is this whole time I was learning with them along the way. The team ended up winning $25,000, which was the largest check that they had ever seen. It's the largest check that I, as a teacher, had ever seen coming into my classroom at that time. And that meant that they moved on. Now, I don't know about you, but my vision for the way that invention and engineering should work is I thought everyone was just kind of in this room. They were working together. Do you see the picture on the right? They're collaborating. They're drawing out wonderful pictures. They're thinking through their thoughts. They're prototyping. And I was going to be out hiking the wilderness of Oregon. It was going to be a wonderful summer. But in reality, like a lot of us know, this is it. It was messy. At one point, there were water bottles that were all over the ground because they were working on an invention to turn plastic into 3D filament. So we came back together, and this team of individuals was able to meet with other people in the industry. And yeah, we're celebrating women in STEM, but I think myself as a woman learned from this group of guys. And I learned that, you know what, we can show up in a space that we don't necessarily feel comfortable in, and we don't know how to be in a space, but we're going to learn and we're going to grow and we're going to learn together. So they showed up, they worked super hard. They were prepared every step of the way. So my encouragement to you all today is no matter what opportunity is in front of you, show up and be prepared because you never know what might happen. They ended up competing at the state level competition with multiple other colleges in the state of Oregon. And guess what? They ended up winning the grand prize. They ended up winning $32,000 by the end of the whole thing. We went through and we celebrated big. We drove some go-karts in true fashion because you do have to celebrate your wins, whether they're big or prototype from where it was to revamp it to go on to the next competition. Now, this all was happening as I had my math classes. So I still had a group of high schoolers that were sitting in my room watching this all take place. This team, they paved the way for those students. They ended up going on to the final round. They placed second, came home with another $10,000. Insane. This changed the trajectory of the school, and I would say it changed my trajectory. I was going from just this math teacher, and I say just because that's the one that feels like a manageable thing in my life. I was a math teacher, and I was forming myself into a new person, right? I was learning things along the way. I was building a new skill set for myself, and this was 9 years into teaching. So we ended up going on a ton of field trips with groups of students because of this win. Colleges wanted us to join. And it really was kind of like, okay, cool. So we said yes to this opportunity. Now, what does that mean for the people and the students that come along next? So I had a group of students in my, it was actually an honors geometry class that I was teaching. And they said, Mrs. Hull, you owe us something. You know, you've been out of the classroom for a little bit because you were doing that thing with that other group of students. They were winning, but you kind of owe us. You know, they said it in a nice way. And I said, okay, well, I have a field trip. You could go on this field trip with me. And it was actually on that field trip that this student here, her name is Leslie. Leslie said to me, Mrs. Holt, you've been promising us that if we are patient, that the opportunity would come to us because those guys opened the door for us. Somebody in front of us opened the door, and now what opportunity is there for us? So we went searching for it, and we actually found the Lemelson MIT program. And this is when the Invent team became a reality for our school. We started looking and we said, you know, hey, there's a group of students here that are interested in invention. They're super excited about it. They don't know really what goes into it, but they want to sign up for it. Well, this is all happening. I decide in the summer, this summer, instead of hiking, I was like, well, at least I'll go to summer camp this summer. So I went to summer camp and I learned things. And I think that's something that has stuck with me from when I was a young child until now, is I love learning. And I would encourage all of you, take any opportunity to learn possible, whether that be in school or a summer opportunity. So summer's happening. I have to restructure my entire classroom. Once again, it's messy, folks. It's not beautiful. I put this picture up here because I wanted you to see behind the scenes of what happens in a classroom as teachers are preparing. There's a lot happening. They had adjusted my schedule, so I was now not just teaching math classes, I was teaching engineering classes too. We started a whole engineering pathway at my high school. Messy, to say the least. We were getting students excited, and students are excited about inventing and engineering and learning about STEM careers and how that could fit into their lives. We were building things and doing tons of prototyping together. And then you know what? That team, that Lemelson MIT Invent team ended up getting the scholarship, getting the grant. This is when they found out that they had received enough money to actually travel to Massachusetts, which from Oregon all the way across the country is a long distance. We were so excited, and we learned a lot about ourselves in that year of invention. Some of these faces might be familiar to you. And this group of students started paving the way for the students that came after them. So what has come out of this whole experience is I said yes. I said yes years ago. And now I kind of embrace this mess of this invention and this designing, and how do we go through and really create things that enhance other people's lives. This year we have a group of students that is working on a Samsung invention project. So I say all of these things and I tell you these stories because I want you to know that you never know what your yes might mean for the people that come after you. I didn't know what my yes would mean. And my encouragement to you today is say yes to your opportunities, embrace the mess, and keep moving forward because you'll never know what happens next. Thanks for letting me share a little bit of my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, yeah, now we're going to move into our question and answer portion of this. I think I've been like super excited to hear Wanda and Katrina's stories. They're super inspiring and really awesome to see all the different ways that you can be a woman in STEM, right? So I'm going to start with a question for both of you from myself. And while I'm doing that, if you guys have other questions, I think I've seen a couple come through in the chat. You can put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to those. But what I want to start with is how do you think so you've both talked about these opportunities and these journeys and these paths that you've taken, and how do you think those were different because you were women, and how do you think that affected that journey, for the better or for the worse, and how did you go through those paths and make those journeys as women in a field where historically it was very male dominated?
I can start if you want. I will say that when I did pharmacy school, back in the day in Puerto Rico, actually pharmacy was more towards females than males, and physician was the one that was more males than females. So being a pharmacist and as a woman wasn't that big of a deal. But when I went to med school, then it was a deal. And then becoming the president of my class and I win against a male was another part of the system. And I think as a woman, we have the ability of organize multiple things, you know, and nothing against guys, right? Because they can do this the same way, right? But I think we have the brain to be able to multitask and do many things and organize and get everything set. And I will say that when you're a physician, many times, actually, there is unconscious bias. Patients see you with a resident, male resident, and they will talk to you like you are the student and the resident is the physician, right? And you have to politely say, well, I am the doctor, right? This is the medical student. And sometimes it's very interesting. They will also, because of unconscious bias, they will address you by your first name, even though you're a doctor. And sometimes I didn't mind. I said, you can call me Wanda, no issue. But they will call me Wanda and they will call a male Dr. So-and-so. So I think you just have to, I always did it in a nice way, put in a smile on my face and correct them. But I think as a woman it's a little bit more difficult, but not impossible. We can all do it.
Oh, I like that a lot. Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting that you were talking about pharmacy being predominantly women centered, right? And I think education is a similar path. When you initially asked that question, I thought, you know, I really don't think that I have identified necessarily as like I am a woman in STEM, but I am. Like, how did I get here? Well, I think it really is because I had opportunities along the way where people said, Katrina, you're really good at math. You're really good at science. In high school, I got the highest mathematics award for my school, which at the time, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm the best at it. I love it. Of course, this makes sense. I work hard at it. I ask really good questions in class and I show up and I do the work. And then in college, a lot of my friends were actually engineers. We were taking the same math classes. A math education major and an engineering major actually takes the same math classes. It's just education takes the education classes and engineers take the engineering classes, which was fascinating. So I did a lot of my studying with the male engineers. At the school that I went to, there were not a lot of female engineers. And I have thought a couple of times, like, I wonder if there would have been more females in that field if I would have been interested in going into engineering instead of education. But I think the path that I have taken is the path that I should have taken. And really, like, this love of engineering has come forth in my classroom. And I'm able to sit in these rooms and spaces with that are predominantly male at this point and say, hey, how do we make this more female friendly? How do we get my students who are females at the table? How do you get their voices to the forefront? And I also think as a female, I get to say, like, wait a second, what just happened wasn't fair. Can we go back and talk about that? And then we do. And I think it really is just being confident in who you are, that you should be in that space. You have a right to be there, and people need to hear your voice.
Awesome. Thanks. But yeah, those are both great answers. I think it's really important for the students to know that, right? Like, making space for yourself in, whether you're a woman or a different minority. Wanda talked about, being a minority when she was in Texas, coming from Puerto Rico, making space for yourself in these places because you should be in these places, right? Your voice should be heard. So that was great. So I saw a question in the chat for Wanda. Someone was wanting to know about when you were transferring between pharmacy and then medicine and then into industry, what challenges did you face? What was your biggest challenge in kind of switching careers and fields?
Yeah, sorry, Luna, she wants to be here. I think from going to pharmacy to med school, I would say it was more financial. because I didn't have the means. So I was still working as a pharmacist while going full time to med school. So that was a little bit stressful, but not impossible, right? And you just have to um, find people that support you. And then when going to industry was very interesting because they told us in medicine that industry is the dark place. You don't go there, you don't meet with people at industry, right? And now I'm just going to the dark space. But actually was pretty good. The main change that for me was significant is that I used to give a lot of advice as a physician. I tell the people, you should do this, you should do that. And in industry, you're not supposed to give advice, right? You just go through the facts. And that's another thing that I like about my job in industry. It's like you become subject matter experts. So you show the data, you go through the facts, and that's what you stay to. So other than that, I think it was just navigating the different worlds, but not too bad.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we have a few questions coming in through the Q&A, so I'm just going to ask them in the order that they came in. So the first one is for both of you. And a student asked, did any disrespect of male peers in your respective spaces affect your mental health? Especially, they pointed out like lack of recognition for your accomplishments. Did you find that being something that you had to kind of overcome?
I am going to jump in here because this has happened recently where there has been some big things that have happened at my school, and I felt like my administrators, who happen to be male, did not celebrate myself or the students in the way that I felt they should be celebrated. And I think maybe my competitive personality comes out in those spaces, because when that happens, I think to myself and I act upon it like, no, you should be celebrating these things. We're going to celebrate them together with or without you. So in those instances, I will always go find a different route to share the story, a different avenue. I'll call up a newspaper and say, hey, I have an amazing story about a student I want to share with you. And then those people that didn't celebrate it in the way that I felt was appropriate take notice. And the next time they've learned, like, no, don't pass up an opportunity to celebrate something that needs to be celebrated.
I love that. I love that story and that you seek the opportunity. And I think actually I have done things like that too. When I have done something and people hasn't recognized, I find a way to discuss it in a meeting or in some way to bring it back to this was my idea, right? We know that, and this is something that I have seen in industry, not as much as some people tell me, but in industry, usually males say the same thing that you say, but they say it differently and they are praised and they will be. So I try to make a point that either I say it before, right? Or how it was said, right? And make it straight. Not that I want to put anyone down, but we should get ourselves respect. And if we don't do it, nobody else will do it. So, and I love the idea about getting to a publication or something and let the people know. That is really cool.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, and so then I have another question for you, Katrina. I know we have several teachers that usually attend this, so I think there's probably several teachers in here. I noticed, so the first team that you shared were all males, right? And then the next team there were way more females. So how do you get your female students specifically excited about science and kind of coming on board with these opportunities that maybe are a little more male dominated?
Oh, I wish I had the secret sauce for that. Here are some patterns that I've recognized. I recognized this in my math classrooms, that whenever I would ask a question, if there was a question that a female did not feel confident in the answer, they would not raise their hand and give the answer. But a male student would be more likely to raise their hand and give a wrong answer. So they're happy to give an answer, whether it's right or it's wrong. Now, on occasion, female students raise their hand and give wrong answers. I'm not saying that that never happened, but just overall, the trend, that's kind of that from that very first team, it was male dominated. I had a few female students that were in the club at the time, but it was a brand new club. It was something new that people had not really gone and done it before them. And I think as females, we like to know that we are going to have success in whatever we're doing. Like, I don't like walking into a space and not knowing, like, am I going to be successful here? Okay, we all can see that I have a strong dose of confidence. So it takes a lot for me to be in a space where I'm like, ooh, I don't really feel confident. But in those settings, I don't really want to be there. And I think for the female students to join in and to buy in, they need to be invited multiple times. And that was something that I was able to do in the math classroom, is say, oh, hey, you're really good at math. Come join my engineering club. And then those students were like, okay, you know what? I'd love to be a part of a club that's not attached to my grade. And so they actually, I think that was why that Invent team had so many females, because they had never done that before. But what was cool is it wasn't attached to their grade. They got to go to MIT, so they were winners regardless. And then they really did learn and grow, which as females, I think that's what our nature is. We want to learn, we want to grow, we want to be in those spaces where we can be successful. So providing opportunities, and I think really just helping my female students see themselves in those successful spaces, and people who don't necessarily identify with whatever it is that we're doing, as long as I can help paint that picture, like, here's how we're going to be successful together. Yeah, we don't know how to do those things, but we'll figure it out together. You're not alone. And the Samsung team that I have right now, they also, it's mainly females that are on that team. So it's sticking. And I think as more people see people like themselves going ahead and leading the way, you want to join in and be a part of that. So I think for the people that are on this call, like that, what can you do a little outside of your comfort zone that might make it easier for someone steps?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, so we have another question. This one is for Wanda, and it's someone wanting to know about some neurology. So they said, what are some technologies or rising technologies that we're using now to gather information on the brain? And how do they compare to sort of how neurology used to be before technology really kind of amped up?
Well, I will say, and I haven't been immersed in neurology, but I will give you some. When I went to UConn, to the mainland, when I moved to the mainland to do neurology, was because back in Puerto Rico, we didn't have a lot of technology. So, for example, when a person has a seizure or epilepsy, right? We put some monitors in the brain and do an EEG and electroencephalogram to look at the waves of the brain. So in mainline, we have it in a computer system, and everything was set up in the computer and you can read it from there. In Puerto Rico, it was paper. So every time every hour, you have this pack of paper, and then you have to be moving the papers to read it. And I thought, even though I can stay here with my family and do it, I want to learn from the best. So let me just go to mainland. I learned those techniques, and my thought at the time was I was going to go back to Puerto Rico, which didn't happen, right? But that is one of the things. So if I compare that when I was in med school, that things were more like paper and you didn't have much. Now there's some of the conditions that never had treatment, but now we have treatment for it, right? We have the deep brain stimulator for Parkinson. That was something that for me was key, because my grandma had Parkinson's, right? And that's one of the reasons I went into neurology, and she died and we didn't have much to offer. But now people can have this little device inserted in their brain that give these pulses, and the tremors are going to stop, the rigidity is going to stop, and you can be more functional, right? We also have different technologies to monitor symptoms of patients, right? That are more electronic. Here at Biogen, for example, we have something that is called Eval, which is in an iPad, and you can evaluate cognition over time. So there has been a lot more in I can certainly talk more about it, but just those are a few examples.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And I think those are also really good examples when we talk about, so, we talk about how like this is sponsored by Biogen and the Lemelson MIT program, and you guys will hear like us, the Biogen people talk about biotech, and the Lemelson MIT people talk about invention. Those are great examples of where those two things work together, right? And I think that's one of the really cool things about science is no matter kind of what field you like, maybe you're like super into math or engineering or biology, there are ways to help people and to change the world, working together with all of those fields. So you should really, I recommend find the one that you're passionate about. Obviously, we've had Katrina that is so passionate about math, and it's taken her down this path, and then Wanda that was so passionate about helping patients. And so when you take those passions, I feel like they can lead to some really awesome things and some awesome collaborations, um, for the students. So I think these are really great examples that you guys have given. It looks like we have about 5 more minutes. So if you have any last minute questions, now would be the time to ask them. So you can pop those in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A. And then while we wait just to see if there's any last minute questions, I want to give Wanda and Katrina the opportunity, if you have any like closing statements or last things that you kind of want to leave the students with.
I just want to tell them, I agree with Katrina about providing the opportunities, right? When you are maybe not you as a student, but when you grow and you become and you are a neurologist or a pharmacist or an engineer or a math teacher like Katrina that has these groups, right? Give back, right? Make sure that you give back. While you're now as a student, seek the opportunity. And this might be hard because you don't know where to go. But there's always a teacher, and actually for me was my math teacher. She was awesome. Someone that gives you that confidence, right? And then look to this person for advice. How can I get to these opportunities? And also look for a mentor, someone that can advise you and help you grow if you don't have this in your family, right? Where you are now, I said, is not where you're going to end. You can create your own path. And then when you are where I am now, just make sure that you pay back, you pay forward, you help others, you mentor others. And women, we need to support each other. Sometimes I see that women do not support each other. It's more like a competition, but really we need to support each other because we don't do it, who's going to do it, right? And
I would like to say that when you are going through your life's journey, don't stop learning. Don't stop being curious about what is happening around you and why things are happening. So, yes, math is my passion, but I can tell you that in college, I went to many guest speakers who were authors, and they were talking about why they were writing the books in the format they were writing them. And I think it's really important to make sure that you're broadening your horizons. And yeah, you have a passion, you have the things that you're really excited about. But I think individuals who are really well rounded, they step outside of those passions to learn a little bit about something else. Oh, so they can better get their passion on track, or if their passion ever overlaps with this other thing, they have a little bit more context. So never stop learning. Find a mentor, find somebody who you admire, and then talk to them as often as possible. Send them an email, send them a thank you note. Connect with them when you're struggling with something in your career, whether that be choosing a college to go to, whether that be choosing what internship to apply for. Talk to someone, reach out to the people that you admire, because probably if you admire them, they think very highly of you.
I will add, Katrina, when you say that, because it's certain, it's true. Something I learned also says, don't self-doubt yourself, right? Sometimes you feel, oh, how I'm going to go and talk to this person, they're not going to listen. But you never know what's going to happen if you don't ask or you don't talk, right?
Yeah, and this was awesome for both of you to say, because while you were talking, a question came through that was about creating opportunities where there aren't any, and I think both of you really hit that right about finding people and finding those opportunities, and especially, we're in the middle of a pandemic, in case you guys didn't know, but that's really taught us a lot about connecting to people that maybe aren't even geographically near you. So I think it's really opened up a lot of students to a lot of new opportunities that are virtual, people that they can access. You can get on Zoom calls. So when you think about things like looking for opportunities and looking for mentors, even if you're somewhere where maybe those are a little bit less available, now there's this whole internet that's really kind of built to connect people. So I would really recommend searching and finding the opportunities, because they're there. You may have to just kind of think outside the box a little bit. Um, Along those lines, I'm going to share my screen for just a second. We want to thank you all for coming and joining, and especially a huge thank you to Katrina and Wanda. You guys were awesome. Here we go. Yes. So next month we'll have another speaker, same time, same place, third Wednesday every month. But specifically, I wanted to give a little plug for next month. It's Earth Month, in case you guys didn't know April's coming. And so we're going to talk a little bit on climate change, and we have someone who is currently a graduate fellow at Biogen, but he is also at MIT doing some really cool research about climate change and how that affects us. So make sure that you join us for next month, and then, like I say, every month. We're always talking about really cool things. So, with that, I hope that you all have a great rest of your day. Again, thank you to Wanda and Katrina. And if anyone on the chat, in the call, wants to listen again, or has other wants to check out our other things, we also have a website that I'm going to paste in the chat, where we will be uploading the recording of today, and we have our past events uploaded as well. So I'm going to paste that in the chat now. Other than that, like I say, it's 5 o'clock, so I'm going to let you all go. But thank you all for being with us. We really appreciate you joining, and hope you have a great night.